Mr. Ciattarelli, thank you so much for doing this, and I appreciate it.
Dan, thank you.
So I want to begin with a very hot topic, specifically for New Jersey commuters, and that is the topic of congestion pricing. New Jersey drivers could very well be double tolled. As you know, the logistics, they're still being worked out, right? But where do you actually stand on the issue of congestion pricing, and how do you see yourself working with New York on ensuring the best for New Jersey drivers?
I understand the intention of getting more cars off the road. I understand the intention of trying to get more people to use mass transit here in New Jersey. My job as governor to make sure that New Jersey transit is safe and dependable so that we maximize ridership, shall I say. But let me tell you what I'm not going to ever support is congestion pricing. Considering the fact that we've got 400,000 New Jerseyans that work in New York, pay taxes to New York, which produces a $2 billion windfall for New York. That's not something I'm ever going to support, especially considering what it is they're paying to cross the river in the first place.
And speaking of commuting, that brings me to the next topic, which would be jobs, right? And getting people back to work. Very important topic here. And you've said unemployment benefits were too generous for too long. So would you continue with the $500 incentives to get people back to work? And if yes, who does it apply to?
So I'm not ever for paying people to do what it is they're supposed to be doing in the first place. And I do believe the unemployment benefits were too generous for too long, particularly when you add to that the $300 supplement that was coming from the federal government. New Jersey has the highest unemployment rate in the nation, and yet everywhere you go there's a help wanted sign. Those two things don't go together. So it's time for us to get back to work. I'll save lives, but we also need to save livelihoods. And the way to do that is for people getting back to work.
So give me one example then specifically how you plan to get people back to work without an incentive.
By cutting off the unemployment benefits. We all know traditionally unemployment benefits cut off after 27 weeks. And we all know that the Department of Labor is supposed to verify whether or not you're looking for work as a contingent, as the reason why you get your unemployment benefits. So we're going to start having our Department of Labor under Governor Ciattarelli verifying whether or not you're looking for work.
All of this surrounds, of course, the topic of COVID-19, a pandemic that we are still very much in. In one day last week, let me just throw some numbers at you. There were over 1,500 new cases in the state of New Jersey, 28 new confirmed deaths. Now you, sir, you are vaccinated and said in the last debate, quote, "I will always preserve, protect, and promote public safety," end quote. So if elected, would you reverse the current mandates that exist? And if so, how are you ensuring the safety and protection of everyone that you are looking out for?
To the best of my knowledge, we don't have mandates. I think Phil Murphy put the right policy in place, let's say, for example, for school teachers. You get vaccinated or you get tested. So I'm all about promoting, preserving, and protecting the public health and safety. I think my job is to give citizens all the information they need to make an informed decision. Thank you for mentioning that I'm vaccinated. I promoted that, and I strongly encourage people to get vaccinated. But do I believe government has a right to tell people they have to take the vaccination? I don't. So I want people to get vaccinated. We'll give them the information they need. But the policy you put in place for teachers is the right policy. Get vaccinated or get tested.
The CDC has shown nationally, since you're mentioning teachers, that over 58,000 pediatric hospitalizations took place nationwide in September amongst kids. On the day of your last debate in New Jersey, there were 21 kids in pediatric care, 5 of them in intensive care. If you are governor, what is your position on masks in a classroom?
I wouldn't be for a student mask mandate. I believe that that's up to the parents. I think that's an infringement of parental rights. And for every column I've read that says children should be in masks, there's a column that says don't force that on them by another clinician that says it inhibits learning and adversely affects their intellectual and emotional development. The European equivalent of the CDC here in the States says no masks under age 6. The World Health Organization says no masks on kids below 12. I think we have to find a policy that works for most everybody.
And I want to stay on the topic of schools for a moment. There's been a lot of discussion around critical race theory and whether it should be taught or not. New Jersey PTA meetings, for example, have been very contentious, showing both sides of the argument here. You said you would not teach it, sir, but would you actually define what critical race theory is?
So it's a theory that says that white people perpetuate systemic racism, and I don't think that we should be teaching our children that the white person is the oppressor and the black and brown person are the oppressed. Is there white privilege? Yes, we do know that whites have had access to things that blacks have not. Has the black race been disadvantaged and marginalized? Yes. Has there been economic injustice? Yes. But I've got a very specific plan on how to revive the black community, economically speaking, and address economic injustice. But getting back to schools, let's teach our history, warts and all. But let's not have our children of today feeling guilty over sins that they didn't commit.
So is there an age that you would teach it?
I would teach our history, warts and all. I think it's a sad commentary on our public school system that less than 15% of our high school graduates know that slavery was central to the Civil War.
On the topic of schools, you said the way New Jersey funds these 600 school districts is terribly flawed. You cited a more equitable distribution during your last debate. So specifically, what does that mean, and how would it affect poorer districts?
So what a lot of people don't know is the income tax, the state income tax in New Jersey, can only be used for one purpose only: state aid to schools. So over $9 billion comes into Trenton, over $9 billion goes back out as aid to our 600 school districts. And the current formula, in my opinion, is very, very arbitrary and nefarious, and it creates inequities in the community in terms of property taxes. Now, let me be clear. I'm never going to leave any child or community behind. I'm not going to adversely affect the quality of education. But we're not going to send state aid to the homeowner of $1 million home in places like Hoboken and Jersey City. We're not doing that.
So yes or no, would you end court-mandated funding for poorer districts, and if so, why?
I will come up with a formula that works for all New Jersey without leaving any community or any child behind. And there's a few things our state Supreme Court doesn't know about how nefarious the current formula is.
You've pointed out that your opponent did not approve one single new charter school in the city of Newark. If you are elected governor, how many would you like to see under your administration?
Wherever a school system is failing based on attendance rates, graduation rates, performance on SATs, college acceptances, or readiness for career if you're not going to college. If you're failing in 2 or 3 or 4 of those areas, I think the parents in that community and their children deserve a choice.
So let's talk about property taxes right now. It's a very hot button issue in New Jersey.
As always.
We have seen you highlight this point in your campaign ads, right, and say that you pledge to not raise taxes and go as far as saying that you'll actually reduce them. So to a middle income family paying somewhere between $10,000 and $14,000 in property taxes, what would they be paying under a Governor Ciattarelli administration?
So right now, the owner of $1 million home in Jersey City and Hoboken pays less in property taxes than the owner of a $400,000 home. What I want to see is equity across the board, and we don't have that right now in New Jersey. So listen, here's something you'll often hear, that Massachusetts and New Jersey have the best school systems in the country, and that's true. But here's the big difference. Massachusetts school system is 20% less expensive than ours. I'm sending a work study group up there to find out why. Take 20% off the average property tax bill in New Jersey, that's a big deal.
So just to be clear, yes or no to a millionaire's tax?
We need a tax system that works for all New Jerseyans. Right now, it doesn't. Our top bracket here in New Jersey is 8 points higher than the top bracket in Pennsylvania. We're going to be regionally competitive.
But when it comes to a millionaire's tax, would you, a yes or no?
We'll have a tax code that works for all New Jerseyans.
And to be clear, will you pledge right now in this very moment, now you said you will not raise taxes, but will you not raise taxes for 4 years?
We're not going to raise taxes. We have more than enough revenue. We don't need to increase tax rates. We need to increase the base. And the reforms I have in mind for our economy, this will be a thriving economy. That's the way you produce more tax revenue, not by increasing rates, which is exactly what Phil Murphy does. And by the way, what he said to the highest taxed people in the nation is, if taxes are your issue, we're probably not your state.
Mr. Ciattarelli, in 2024, if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee for president, will you vote for him?
I'm going to support the nominee that supports New Jersey. I've disagreed with Donald Trump on 3 issues that are really important to New Jerseyans. We do not want offshore drilling. We want the SALT deduction back, and we want funding for the Gateway project. I've disagreed with him publicly on that time and time again. I'll support the nominee that is supportive of New Jersey.
So if that nominee is Donald Trump, you would support him?
I do not see him reversing himself on those, and I see a very crowded field in the Republican primary in 2024.
Understood. I want to get to a topic that you've come under fire for, and that's a rally that you attended, billed as a Stop the Steal rally. You denied knowing that that's what it was billed as. Now, there are images of you standing directly in front of a Stop the Steal sign, and you're quoted in a campaign ad saying, quote, "We're trying to make sure things go our way." Can you explain what you fully said in your appearance there to put this issue to rest?
And I think if you listen to what I said there today, my comments were focused on 2021, where the governorship and all 120 seats in the state legislature are up for election. I was personally invited by the organizer, and he told me the focus was 121. The governorship plus all 120 seats in the state legislature. When I got there, I didn't see anybody wearing apparel that had Confederate flags. I didn't see any signs. I can't be held responsible for what people wear or hold up once I start speaking. If I had known it was a Stop the Steal rally, I would not have attended. Joe Biden was our president.
During the pandemic, we saw a racial reckoning in this country, and we're still seeing it play out today. We've seen a national conversation really around the topic of police reform. Now, I checked out your campaign website, sir, and it says that you oppose the release of personnel files for cops, you oppose civilian complaint review boards, and you oppose qualified immunity when a gun is not discharged. So what does reform look like under Governor Ciattarelli?
Well, I think we have to find a way to get rid of bad cops, and I've got suggestions on how to do that. But you can't demoralize the people in this profession. We used to get 20,000 applications a year for state police jobs. We're down to 2,000. And if you talk to police chiefs across the state, nobody is applying for the job anymore. And those that do, the caliber isn't great. The people that used to want to protect us don't want to protect us anymore. So I think we need to treat it as the profession it is and stop demoralizing our police.
So to hold a police officer accountable, you said you have a few examples. What are they?
Well, for example, look at the officer that kneeled on George Floyd's neck. He was a 20-year veteran with 17 different disciplinary cases against him. We're not going to tolerate that. We'll give you 1 or 2 if they're not egregious. Then you're being let go. So we need to have reforms in place to get rid of bad cops. And guess what? The good cops agree.
Homicides are up in New Jersey right now more than 25% this year. As a former assemblyman, you voted against background checks and wanted to expand who can carry guns and concealed weapons. Are those 2 areas that you would actually push as governor as part of a larger strategy on gun violence within the state?
We need a national background check system. With today's technological advances, there's no reason why we shouldn't have that. What I have said here in New Jersey, if you go around the state, as I have for the past 23 months as a gubernatorial candidate, there are certain dangerous professions that think they should be allowed to arm themselves. For example, the people that replenish ATM machines. That's a very dangerous profession. Realtors who are trying to earn a living sitting alone all day. You'd be surprised what you find if you went to Google and put in violence on realtors. There's people that work within Phil Murphy's own state government in child services whose job it is to go and check on troubled homes on the children. They will tell you many times they have to bring a cop with them because they don't like knocking on that door and not being armed. So let's have a discussion about dangerous professions.
Do you see a problem with the gun pipeline from the south to our area?
Absolutely. It's a problem across the nation. Illegal guns coming here illegally. One thing Phil Murphy will never tell you, I was the only Republican in the state legislature last time I ran in 2014 not to be endorsed by the NRA.
How do you handle that pipeline?
We have to work together, the 50 governors and the president. You know, one of the things that Phil Murphy doesn't understand is you can't solve national problems one state at a time. This is where I think the National Governors Association, in partnership with the president and the congressional leadership, need to work together. And I just see a very disjointed relationship time and time again on both sides of the aisle when it comes to issues like this that cross state boundaries.
The pandemic exposed some inequities as well in so many black and brown communities. What are 2 areas, you often talk about crisscrossing the state, 2 areas that you saw firsthand where inequities played out, and how would you go about fixing them?
First and foremost, access to health care. We've seen this time and time again in our poorer communities, and as governor, I'm committed to ensuring that there is easy access to high quality care, and I want to give us some opportunity to kind of do Medicaid differently in this state, using it as a community block grant type of funding so we can put multi-specialty, high quality care in communities of color where there isn't great access. The other thing is, with regard to disparities, is the access to the vaccination. Now, Patterson in New Jersey has done a magnificent job, and the reason they have is because they worked in partnership, county, local leadership, with civic leaders, including pastors. Find those leaders that the people in the community trust most. Get them involved. And the vaccination rate in Patterson is the very best in New Jersey for a big city.
Abortion has once again become a hot topic, not only around the country, but in New Jersey as well. You've talked about it during the debates, and you recently said, I've never advocated for what is a right to choose. I've never not advocated for what is a right to choose. But your campaign website says you support a bill to prohibit abortions after 20 weeks. Can you explain the position there?
I think what I said is I've never advocated for Roe v. Wade being overturned. I've always supported a woman's right to choose. I'm personally opposed to abortion, but I don't think government has a right to take that choice away from a woman. But at the same time, I think that there are some reasonable restrictions. The science says that the developing baby is viable after 5 months. The science says that the developing baby can feel pain during an abortion after 5 months. I think we should have some restrictions in place. But one thing I know New Jersey does not support is what Phil Murphy wants. Abortions in months 7, 8, and 9, as performed by somebody other than MD. He doesn't even want parents to be notified if a teenager is pregnant and seeking an abortion. I haven't found anybody on either side of the aisle that supports that.
As an assemblyman, you voted to defund Planned Parenthood, which your opponent says would hurt communities and women of color in particular. As governor, would you defund Planned Parenthood?
Well, my vote then was a vote on principle. Why do we send all the money for women's health to the agency that advocates for abortion? Why don't we send any money to agencies that advocate for women, that support women's health, that don't advocate for abortion? I think the money should be fairly distributed. So that doesn't mean I'm going to take it entirely away from Planned Parenthood. They take care of thousands upon thousands of women. But we send all the money to the one agency that advocates for abortion. Why don't we send it to a place like Lighthouse in Bergen County, which does a magnificent job with women's health, but doesn't advocate for abortion?
But your opponent says that it would specifically hurt women and communities of color. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, my response, Dan, would be don't listen to everything my opponent says. If you look at his ads, he's lying about my positions.
Understood. Now, your opponent also cited that your opponent raised the state budget and that you would actually vow to reduce it. Give me 3 specific areas that you would reduce the state budget by.
Here's what I've said. His third budget was $42 billion. His last budget, which recently took effect, was $46.5 billion. That's a $4.5 billion increase, an $11 billion increase over his entire 4 years. I'll tell you what I'll do. My first budget, I'll adopt his third budget. That's $42 billion. We just saved $4.5 billion.
So 3 specific areas that you would cut.
All you have to do is look at his third budget and compare it to his fourth budget, and you'll find your cuts.
But what are they under Governor Ciattarelli's administration? I don't want to look at Phil Murphy's. I'm looking directly at Governor Ciattarelli's administration, looking for 3 specific examples.
Then let's pull out his third budget, and we'll see exactly where we'll be cutting compared to his fourth budget. But let me say this. His budget's up $11 billion, more than 30% in 4 years. No governor in the history of New Jersey has ever increased spending that much in such a short period of time.
I want to talk about the environment as well. Governor Murphy has touted his clean energy plan, which focuses heavily on offshore wind. You've questioned that plan a number of times and its price. But I want to know whether you actually believe the state needs a clean energy plan.
What the country needs is a national energy plan that the 50 governors and the president agree on, that galvanizes the American people. You cannot solve global warming and climate change, which I believe is real and accelerated by human activity, one state at a time. No matter how clean our air is in New Jersey, as long as Pennsylvania is burning coal, guess what? Our asthmatics in New Jersey are going to suffer. So I do believe that his energy plan isn't realistic. We need a rational transition to the future. And what he's not telling us is what the cost is going to be to turn every one of the appliances in your home into an electric appliance and then have to rewire your home to get enough electricity in there to feed those appliances. That average bill is going to be $30,000 to $50,000 per homeowner. I think people deserve that kind of transparency.
I want to talk about mass transit as well, right? We talked about congestion pricing at the top. Now, I used to be myself a New Jersey bus rider heading in and out of Manhattan, and there were plenty of headaches that went along with that bus ride each and every single day.
Yep.
New Jersey Transit's come a long way since I was riding the bus. Where do you see New Jersey Transit right now, and where is it getting its funding from?
It's not safe, it's not dependable, because for years, governors on both sides, including Murphy, have stolen money out of the capital plan, which are the investments for tomorrow, and paid operating expenses with it. Guess what? He's sitting on $10 billion in surplus. $4 billion from the last budget, and $6 billion from Joe Biden's American Rescue Act. There's 2 top priorities for me with that money if he doesn't spend it in lame duck. Those 2 top priorities are making the capital investments that are necessary in New Jersey Transit to make it safe and dependable, and 2, getting caught up on the $2 billion in school construction that we're behind in poor communities, where those children are walking into buildings that are a sad commentary on New Jersey.
And that would come from tax dollars.
That would come from the surplus. Joe Biden has given us $6 billion through the American Rescue Act, and Murphy has $4+ billion in surplus because he borrowed money he didn't have to last budget. We've got $10 billion to play with right now. It's sitting in a checking account right now. Those are my 2 top priorities.
There used to be a lot of money that would come out of Atlantic City. Atlantic City has seen a number of closures over the years. The pandemic obviously hurt so many communities, including Atlantic City. How would you revitalize that area to bring in some new money and revitalize it to what it once was?
What a lot of people don't know is more than 1 out of every $3 in our state budget goes to only 7 of our communities. We've got 565 towns in New Jersey, and 7 get more than 1 out of every $3 in our budget, and Atlantic City is one of them. Okay, those are what I call the fiscal Band-Aids. It's an annual Band-Aid, when in fact those communities need real surgery. And I've got specific ideas on how to revitalize this and make people want to live there again. When we get people that live there, it becomes its own little economical ecosystem, and that magical small business economy takes off, where you open up a pizzeria, I open up a dry cleaner, someone opens up a little accounting firm, a little law firm, and that all starts to happen. So we got to get people to live there again. I'd like to see Atlantic City become the premier active adult community on the entire eastern seaboard. Retirees like being near boardwalks and water. There's a real opportunity here. All the while being sensitive to gentrification. I am not about dislocating or relocating people. When we redevelop these cities, we'll do it in partnership with the people that are there and the leaders that are currently there.
One example of how you would do that.
First of all, we'll leverage opportunity zone legislation with what I call the Ciattarelli redevelopment zone legislation. We will develop entire city blocks at a time. You cannot revitalize a city one lot at a time. We'll redevelop entire city blocks at a time with dynamic mixed use on the first and second floor, and then we're going up with low, moderate, and market rate units. This will also stop the exacerbation and sprawl in New Jersey. If Tropical Storm Ida taught us anything, it's not just 8 inches of rain in 2 hours that caused the flooding, it's the overdevelopment that causes all the excess flow.
Mr. Ciattarelli, we're out of time. I appreciate you doing this.
Dan, thank you.